Is that about live stream?
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
Can I get the link?
I got you.
You judging?
You.
What?
Judging you.
Oh shit! What happened to the nice things?
No,
It'll be the first time.
I'm gonna watch the debate. See what you got to say.
What happened to when you were saying nice things about me?
No. That's not what I meant.
Do you want it emailed to you or
Email. I
text?
meant like I'm going to be watching this case. Judging.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
You don't worry about it.
Just came to say that last. That's all.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Yeah. Oh, that was Chris.
That was Chris.
Hell yeah.
To make all the difference.
I know.
Good luck, John.
Margaret and Danny bring a new? No. I love it. Where they been?
They're debating Kentucky.
Yeah. Ooh, okay, that's cool.
Are you on the panel?
I am.
Okay,
No, look at us.
here you go. Who's the third?
What's so funny about that?
Crack me up.
Wow. For sure. Yo, the DC panel.
That's awesome. We could all hang out at
The
the time.
all DC panel.
That's so exciting. My sister day on flight tomorrow. Really excited.
Wait, what?
My sister day on flight tomorrow to LA.
Oh, have so much
Why
fun!
would they send you home
Well,
on Monday at the NDT? What?
I have work.
So it's kind of like.
You
too.
Oh, how's how?
Yeah, I just saved it.
I thought you were going to.
Yeah, they did too. Yeah, they came out and they were like, we got Grace.
Oh, that's nice.
They're both here.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I wrote some up. Very cool.
Yeah, he hasn't been around
Oh, right.
at all.
Yeah.
He didn't judge her coach this year, he's just here for the interview.
Oh my gosh.
Just me and Mother Hen.
It's so fun. Sunny's are from Taiwan.
It was cheaper to fly Henry from Taiwan than it was to fly me from DC.
That's nice.
I found out.
I have no idea, like, I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's creative.
Sometimes that creativity is just action from.
At least like really exists, right?
You're about to look at
Right, exactly.
You're gonna be really happy with this.
Have you heard?
Yeah.
You've heard?
I know, I feel like it's
Spoilers, what the hell?
Exactly.
I'm glad, it was gonna be a nice surprise for you, like it.
Thank you.
What is this? What here?
Yeah.
Something nice for school.
Hey, how's it
That was good.
Once he's got a little shout out.
What? How's that, Kinsey, like, treating you out?
Wait, Glenda, maybe could you not sit directly in front of
Yeah,
the
like,
others?
I'm gonna be asleep.
No, I'm gonna be like sitting this way.
Okay.
Let's take, like,
Thanks.
I think you said, it's like, it's like you're gonna do a permit.
Yeah, at the beginning, I think nothing, and more recently, it's like, the private sector, yeah, exactly. So I'm sure I'll have to search out a little bit, I haven't, like, surprisingly, used the last 7 months. It's an exploring, it's nice,
Yeah, I'm training hours too.
yeah, I definitely help, it was not helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
When is he signed?
Mine?
Yeah.
Is yours not working? I'll try to plug in down there where mine is.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, that's you. There we go.
Tire open?
Yes.
Well, I've got the last one, and I'm good.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Is anyone not ready? Contention, what is warming and causes extinction? Spangenberg 25, renew the uplift civilization, Everett spiral limits are 26 degrees, Admiral death at Amazon, diametric facility, heating, training, sinking, source, safety, Russian foremost, aim back, maybe next effects for children, arrested with emission increase in 2020, dryness, normal case, double harvest, risk in winter, a cascade restoration of the ecosystem proves impossible growth through negative events, application of democratic erosion, depending on need for arms and business, access to situation, health system, constant heating with instability of each society, funding, revenue, capacity, ability, trade, work, reveal, work, specified, increase, ability, per cross, trade, receive, hero, life, calculated, immobility, swaps, right, left, right, just with future years of common, evil life, is solely possible, time, inflation, putting water, tribulations, risk, sea levels, rising salt, penetrates, west, west, and all rivers, putting world at risk, of affecting our food shell species collapsing, pathogens, loss of pollination, reducing food geoengineering, creating complex spirals, no possible threat of nuclear escalation is growing. It's never too late to prevent, but near-term emissions reductions have increasing value for preventing self-perpetuating warming. SPAC 24, climate reaching to win centuries, last to every text to pass no longer the future chill risks are expected in society in 2024. Let's collapse absorb carbon class of 8 Mach 95% occurring half of the decades will flip the seasons towards for drought emissions that people as soon as the room poverty obvious over decline of the soil, also warming a short day scientists expect warming at more than 3 degrees and 82%. Expect half of the impacts, feedbacks of the year's return on the season as stop warming existential threat could exist at 1.5 degrees. It's anthropogenic, underestimated, and fast that in all 24 variability can explain temperature could be permanent stations of water rises, maybe understated food using unlikely blows and a false security. There's a high probability 5 degrees continent uptake by oceans reaching saturation. It is not clear ocean can do this rate sensitivity, manufacturing, loss of isotopes, albedo, so re-entry, there is a lower marine assumptions. The minor hold such method be reduced even CC sequestration does the present non-linear impacts not CC estimates. Even small increases in GHG salinity can warming lines across different points on the low emissions, force reaching critical temperatures. Acidification induced food shortages cause extinction. Crib 23 conflict can originate with food shortages linked to disputes over the fish access to grass outside of nuclear combat, even limited conflict kill due to villainous nuclear winter conservatives fail, which for the worst of nuclear struggle working the falls in the hands of warlords. Every bit of mitigation matters. Renewables are inevitable now, but too slow to prevent warming. Call 24. Surgery in order to think versus accelerated amount of Trump with the solution is basically with secure clean future on the question of how fast the renewable is the inevitable focus will be making sure this happens as quickly as possible. The national waste secure is the hottest in history, and there's evidence in warrants around you down to show that only the force absorbable carbon, but weapons are literally every panel turbine members have never. Contention 2 is innovation. China is on the cusp of locking in market dominance in the inevitable renewable transition. U.S. innovation policy is key to leapfrog Chinese supply. Allen 25, so looking at a competitive 2025 battery store. Days of energy cost geothermals falling nuclear, so renaissance industry for things Chinese recharges investment in fossil stacking to virgin markets. Thought to be growth and harder demand or industrial clean energy every forecast reduced demand plus energy to short living even been persistently tech. It's true that there's going to see leadership in China simply on trying to point these innovation for policy there is still lots behind US first opinion and great to check the of this country back in the race with how the benefit markets across the market designed to push ahead. New states industrial policy when they're trying to catch up and correct Texas to focus on next factor problems and not silently talking details certain minutes of risk that opportunity. China's graphic details bolstering NDT, finds the vintage adjustment process, the point of the will sales and policies, accelerate commercialization. China will corner the Latin American energy market now, causing social unrest from geopolitical blackouts and monopolized energy. Tiago 23. China's strategy in Latin America is to own the light investment subsidy for assets. Chinese banks 648 overseas plants is now a bit of a monopoly, but urgent electricity and afford hard China's energy dominance future West Asia as an Asia displaced local companies. That goes nuclear civil unrest ensures strong L22. China's advance on Latin America sources of concern of exchange for worse missing include nuclear war crisis could arise from cascading into multilateral assistance and possible collapse of political stability. The global South Asian additions to the widespread globalization violence and regime collapse. The plan creates an energy alternative in Latin America, allowing regional energy diversification. COVID 24 to ensure Latin America can look beyond fishing for energy, especially renewable supply chains, monopolies, and major US bolsters and clean energy and develop access to alternatives to Latin American markets, allowing Chinese companies to capture the value chain within Latin American land benefits while expressing region to receive geopolitically motivated electricity shown as much as support firms as an alternative to China's monopolies and allows the US to counter Chinese influence in the region, solves drug trafficking and terrorism. Davis 25, Trump will have a year when reclaim Latin America if he fails to find itself for the absolute where China's growing. China was the greatest opportunity to drug trafficking, terrorism, resurgence to begin an energy time for the US to refocus on regional initiative and incentives to investors to counter Chinese BRI with alternative terrorism causes nuclear warfare. 21, the steadily expanded across the WD terrorist enemies in nuclear America will arm with nuclear drop trade resources self defense could be nuclear any result of one or several sides could be catastrophic. Planning to place fragilities person could be harsh because a single miscalculated accident the world is will be subject to nurture and produce confidence for nuclear war. It's not too late for US resurgence in Latin America. Birth 327. Reasons national policies to grab the region and China's arms in short term. In the short term, however, there remain risks they may remain and LSE term does not replace remove or something that allows with US will may lose opportunity to keep US safe for China's success and LSE may control private competition really try to farm lose China and LSE Trump prevent long-term risk and build against the short term. The United States federal government should adopt a consistently rising carbon price and border adjustment of approximately $40 and support a competitive portfolio of low carbon technologies. Contention 3 solvency the plan's key 1 carbon pricing. It is necessary for the success of any mitigation policy. Bulls 21 the US needs a tax carbon tax to discourage firms from carbon $40 tax increase for your offers and attract and initial features border adjustment tax given to this and leave it to some free emission cost price would have been and achieve the Chinese taxes but for all subsidies R&D target incentives necessary without risk but effectively insufficient. Only pricing shifts consumption consistently penalizes all carbon sources and backstops emissions reductions from green R&D. Lecture 21 carbon risk will purchase the resources of the simple detecting against such structural sector. The diversity will address the present effect all emissions around low-term signal. General confidence is addressable and building price schedule the increase of GDP impacts the GDP given every you can't settle the initials and able to match an issue of the crisis. Maximum mitigation is key. Warnings the project of more than unpriced externalities making a predictable price path necessary but not sufficient. Then Vendor 21 pricing is absolutely necessary but not sufficient. We have a message challenging and rely on intermittent to review the avoid that's why there's some market first and externalities there are not spillers also plus stability credits one way and with pricing EDS offer heavy limited investors alone and planted pricing coming Friday started better pricing has more important complicated incentives credits. Pricing is a costly for any reduction so that markets their own decision to middle decision first ability transportation just better tax or credit should be combined to DG corporate standards that are reducing emissions of the margin. Cost efficient deters fossil market entry at all unlike solely renewable promotion with the 15. The best way to warm is the price in terminal is warming locking fossil the price of price makes constantly however to demand the function alerted so the price subsidies the necessary top of the price well to the policy just tax or subsidy kind of predictive such you'll work outcome worst outcomes in your policies and encourage fossil industry several quickly cost governing acceleration warmer tax source market internalized cover those three parameters prices subsidies without taxing then there is green paradox is higher extraction only fee subsidy shorts only fee so the accelerated farming and short run pricing imports prevents leakage and induces modeling necessary for global solvency but without a domestic price countries will roll back production and subsidize the many industries will from 23 shares receives unfair profits representing carbon costs. And a CVA in terms of heat attacks, competitive disadvantage for the producers relative to the U.S. as the unravel efficient policies and for producers back to level field as possible. Producers accountability subsidies to maintain competition such as unravel compatible systems don't typically governments with the three only border adjustment the benefits of cost-efficient policies U.S. adjusted could address the good for rid of big licensing costs for all. Serving U.S. market but also enable policies conflicts to subsidies subsidy crucial not the distribution reduction check the running for government adjustments to these virtual policy abroad foreign justified political cover through the transition policy to its own price in response to you also Russia adjusting is key for encouraging maximal foreign mitigation and targeting non-traded emissions. Bill 21 prices need to calculate adjustments for putting countries to use policies of the pricing of routine. This is incentive for countries to influence strong emission policy to the extent jurisdiction is successful boosting exports of emissions intensive goods by pursuing mitigation of tradable sectors so that emissions rise also and hard pressed equivalent need for emissions rights in non-tradable sectors. It covers enough emissions to incentivize global mitigation, melding the public PCA strikes balance between the durability, ease of implementation, performance, here to be limited imports, voids, and for domestic carbon exports, including only sectors with high producers, the average technical learn while still delivering significant benefits such as to be influential constituencies, inclusion will be enough intensity prevent trade trade PCA avoid exempting countries can influence the carbon goods shift their such as PCA could adjust for carbon goods and foreign goods including explicit and implicit present point database and improved to have carbon traded goods. Accounting published consistently activities world input GRMG and receives database with administrative ease. Work 21 short importers or carbon data is already available. The ag trucks emissions for satisfying sector project emissions could be triggered the existing data and include asking to get for data is available cover 80% of trade carbon PCA for subsidy data already used many use of GDP data and define impact of disposal for complex goods or data from slicing consultancies in countries that work in the trade secret social comparative adjustment costs supports the duties as member, complexity to disclosure reporters already engaged in ITAL, already conducts due diligence, excited for these facilities, just farm smart service and penalties for fraud to R&D portfolio. It is necessary for commercializing next generation of Inman Chong 23. Competitors investing in low carbon tech, capture growing clean, markets are really trying to nuclear capture EVs, hydrogen gas, remove the forward with the IRA, the starting point, industry cars, more than basic funding, reverse proactive, because in all the carbon competition, clean energy, US challenged by China, second only US 108, aviation, shipping, tracking solution needed must be commercial scalable for the big intent integration complex systems for low, part of business needed with the need of large RD&D for level developed parts of capital intensive industry because there's a difference in electricity for for wind and externalities such as climate and affiliate, emerging tech and the same from companies must compete on price market fails or profound use commercial, innovative grants and knowledge skills and climate fit for humans, allocation is competitive, goal driven, vocal 21, public missions are less vulnerable after a include will increase support for renewable energy, to make hard cross industries work, and bodies programs include neutral experts, consumer realms, also industry, force industry, also subsequent events, public goals, and empower actors with perception, lectures, budgets, economics, for allocation, review, should evaluate happens regular basis, convention, through controls, vulnerability after such competition, innovation alone causes international free riding in the absence of pricing, Jump 21, innovate based flags, global, versus increments enterprise, the ability of balance of real world freedom, free riding among nations, spending against governments, free riding, so the estimates are also good against countries versus transition, the more nation trades, they're good for baseline colonization, reliability, climate over that on R&D trade, 30 country shows fusion ceases and flips to reverses, nullifies acceptation, first moves to courage innovation, actually have to solve for innovation is more, coordination prior to deployment is needed. I have some extra time. No impact carbon pricing outweighs fossil subsidies. Beers 24. 5 numbers will include a removal of subsidies with the reduction in CO2 from 1%. Reason is decline in subsidies from $570 to $330. IPCC lit review 1.1%. Fossil subsidies have a small impact unless by carbon pricing.
You,
Yep.
okay, who administers the tax?
We think normal means would be, John, that's a good question for you.
Probably the IRS.
Probably the IRS, okay. As per the 1AC, what are all the reasons warming causes extinction?
Oh, I love this game. Okay. 1, Venus effect. So.
I know, yeah, I got you, I know.
Okay. Green. Okay. Just making sure. 2nd, nuclear war. So like competition over resources.
Okay.
3, disease.
Okay.
4, adaptation crowds out productivity investments, and then society collapses. So does all of our infrastructure. 5, ocean salinity. So sea level rise infects all fresh water and contaminates it. So we all die from dehydration. 6, the convergence of all of those things at once is independently existential.
Okay, sure. The innovation advantage, like your uniqueness evidence is from February. What evidence have you read that assumes tariffs on Latin America and says they're willing to buy US clean energy now?
They actually have lower tariffs than the rest of the world, so that kind of creates a comparative advantage for Latin America. They also, there's a strong incentive if the AF does jumpstart clean energy innovation in a bunch of new market niches. There's a powerful incentive.
So as per the plan, correct me if I'm wrong, the only 2 mandates are a consistently rising carbon price and border adjustment.
Oh, well, yeah, wait, you forgot the subsidies part.
Support okay, that's what, okay. The plan applies to every sector?
Normal means yes.
Normal means yes. Consistently rising, what is the mechanism for price rise and how much can it increase?
John, a significant amount. I don't think we're going to give you a specific number.
Yeah.
We already spec the dollar amount.
Okay.
You're welcome.
The Van der evidence says that pricing is necessary but insufficient. How do you solve broader tech spillover?
Subsidies. So the thing that the reason why carbon pricing fails is there's a specific market failure that is not addressed by pricing. And that is that it is cheaper to copy other people's innovations than be the first mover. The plan remedies that because it rewards people for being the first to innovate clean tech.
Okay, what are the things that China has an advantage? Like, what are the clean tech that China has an advantage in now?
A lot of, solar panels, just like general photovoltaic modules.
And what evidence have you read that says the plan is sufficient to scale it fast enough to?
That
overcome
Alan
that?
card is like exceptionally good on that question. It uses the phrase leapfrogs China in critical technology sectors.
Okay, we're good. So next one.
6, I want to say. Yep, and then warming innovation.
Say state.
6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. 6.
Okay, I'm good at bringing it.
Feeling good? Review. 1, 2, 3.
MBS must incentivize military action in markets not unilaterally defined by single excludes taxes. That's both in 22 defined economic incentive for economic market-based of economic non-market-based or an act unilaterally defines pricing system not voluntary include taxes, charges, performance, subsidy, liability, and modifier relative pricing under police supply and demand. Mitigation for limits and ground along the act include regulatory standards, estimates unique place, and companies for command and control counterplans. It's impossible to go to the next off. The act means at least 10 current regs get rolled back. Anderson and 25 extra workers elimination trouble still off around agency probably getting ready to identify at least an existing ones revealed by the and who identifies fully new records. There is thousands be vacant whatever. For agency must identify them revealed or make agency will be limited to the first of for all from one isolation or nowadays direction trend. Whichever one mandate only makes offset a number matter will be right guys and organization I just want to call by subsidy rights issues rules with council of different agencies levels are much 25. The CRA means rollback candidates must come from this narrow list, including the CMMT regs. Most of the list will survive in the status quo. That's cruising 24 October Congress was pursued by rights you find 60 days CRA and rules by Congress by average perfectly 97 rules or just bring this to raising the windows or world challenges conversation associated data are common 1 in 10 policy tables. The court on the whole over 49 major rules to provides for advice for myself rules remaining attack welcome and major activity visual social generator interconnection. CMMC has a CRA motion that will fail now. Rollback would decimate DIB cybersecurity Bautista. And the trying to problem choose the rest of oversure CMMC CRA allows to vote on raise activity community CMMC has a variety of cybersecurity for contribution. So this has no certain to support holding CMMC jeopardize DB cyber provide is key to credibly solving OCOs via deterrence and attribution tax. And then 23 CMMC providing giving including perpetrators about civilian federal responsibility and increasing possibilities and improving on the adversaries how narrow range records accurate attribution improves communication between high cost. 4 unique scenarios for extinction, deterrence, allied assurance, first use, and inadvertent escalation. That's work. And they 20 OCOs on the satellite from space effect from adversarial opportunity with first right and really rose credit. Changing after raptors will the running the awareness you can really not reliable all decided driving inadvertent escalation on the rise or race and continues for striking out of following for stability inadvertent escalation for when include the reasons separate on my visa deterrence. A slew of climate and energy rules are safe now, but any rollback decks climate solvency that's more now. And these reform rules of agency regulators and Congress and for regulators and refrigeration drivers to social Washington privacy and for engines those buildings subsidies be an airtime to speak of a rule not to refute dual sort of reducing licenses damage changes summary value some rules have rules and consequence for coming this year advice rule value cannot be reissued. The next off the affirmative will specify the rate base and trade. Absent that, implementation is a separate question which student solvency should and then on 21 implementation of customer content and tax options include regular control direction tap on the black laws supply chain order and the adjustment of security policy climate change or lower tax income from tax visual uses and actual debate ways to minimize policy typically come through the act nor policy actually getting implemented. Vote negative tax design is a central question of the resolution is key to negligence kind of like competition and education. The next off 50 states and government and other relevant subnational governments should establish a streamlined state carbon tax administration. The SLCTA should recommend rules for uniformization of consistently rising carbon price of approximately $40 and support competitive for legal carbon technologies. The 50 state and relevant subnational government should implement these recommendations. The 50 state governments and relevant subnational government should inform the White House of their cooperation with federal initiatives and contingent on the United States federal government implementing a border adjustment of approximately $40. The kind of plan is legal solves innovation, global leadership, and spurs federal follow-on. That's because Tika should split prom. The 70 states freedom of limited carbon tax, the states legislate carbon tax and private uniform model states will offer organization place normal pressure consumption uses option free tax and other nationalized version. Tax government usually very comfortable with that section to perform operating variations by some government tech government new jobs and then reform country states and carbon tax will simulate and reveal scientific collaboration business ventures and using money hashtag the last plane solves fed keywords Bloomberg in turn you don't have to for the president to agencies and states and accommodated for policy should have and is ongoing. The next off is a policy set. Isaacman's nomination is on track now, but Cruz holds the keys burger. And 325 majority can approve voters for the national company as many to see review especially with the highest number of options that provide options by discussing on fact and support should go for several letters from support as should let us work on innovative whiskers. So everyone here the plan makes him backlash he hates any climate agenda TPP. And the agenda was on the exposure American carbon taxes and carbon tax reform intentions very taxes the topics and energy and non-possible if you want climate agenda. Pushing back is the non is devastating to commercial space Faust. And 3 topics for rising proposals should be the better and that's going to be the worst thing legal in the area of ICS national involvement in social support or activities along the giving over the opportunities to give directly charities thinking about the very important future extinction versus the 16 multi-month species for the luscious after the history of this extinction message and social systems about survival species space and social collaboration as well as economic and environmental protection. The next up is the NDT said U.S.-Russia relations are at a turning point. Ceasefire negotiations are causing normalization now, but consistency and messaging is key. Is checked up. And the 25 Russia restored direct access to blast, which discuss normalizing UNC talking about the diplomatic missions work and integrating for diplomatic and economic titles and constructive discussions table about other missions contributing to having cultural individual and running into relations officer require diplomatic resources to damage limit the economic impact of a C-band weapon. And the China wants to go for economic itself and British countries to build diplomatic context with the cost relations substantial manage success on access to the UTF like major opposition about the headline reputation BTS for at least another mission with recommended policy or major doctors. You have negotiations will be used to leverage for arms control re-engagement. Otherwise, New START expiration guarantees global arms racing Sanger and Torkowski. And then 20 5. Repeatedly writing negotiate for Europe sentences to negotiate about the Ukraine officially taking on a relationship with running the talks on position leaving the land treaty, but the Ukraine to reserve the last season workshop system to utilize and talking about providing discussions on strategic ability to over the boundary negotiations that will like room, Trump like exceptions and peacemakers suggestions of no passing and into your rules or argument would make later. And then you can engage from the US after diplomatic organization, which is ready when ready, when Russian sides into that bomb is more paramedic and insider discuss strategic ability, great functional not both weapons and use the invitation on short of the Trump fight and talk about reference to the first term organizing causes nuclear war extinction Claire. In 2016, you start treating a lot of work, which is been for participation with the trees, the decision to your weapon, little range, liberation, drug knowledge, manufacturing, they also agree new version of albums of the best conversation of man, new starting albums, and arsenal should use commercial new starting albums, or the united whatever you will limit the powers, and the new version of leadership, and new drill, and starts building, because of solving issues, suspicion, hostility, and age, and escalation of any persons rise, between them, the more advantage, fossil fuel subsidies and tax breaks, offsets, any effects, presumption, Kangen, trying to the economic protection, never keep information required by climate percent, and small or business opportunity to go out the tax office, and cost business advantage tax simply offset globally global subsidies are providentially expected rising from constitution subsidies tax cancel over some negative form which means discuss as well there's cultural challenges market incentives are useless as Gordon 22 LNBS limitation deal descriptions or problems and conversion office rate and work failure and also not operation build limited for hard limits to last about the investor owners and all from like because of molecules and because business also good since use them independently energy and the prices fossil fuels lower prices leading to rebound water just need to the culture direction to the base need to be targets renewables only work for energy other sectors take too long and other countries stump buck 20 other versions involved in farmers managed to remember dual hospitals being distributed all industry transportation 60% electromagnetic airship charging delivery not negative for seal ammonia cement and plastic representation danger of dealing after cheating decades for US and spelling industry schools by new names if you said goals you see presentation for now Chinese names and cloud BTAs are logistical nightmare and an ineffective state is our intended version of arguments against our trade or domestic industry or protect only the industry or domestic market all tier from all products and possible to believe our target take back about our more flows challenges or menaces to say nothing over here is important small relative global tariffs are mostly dealing but impossible and expensive leakage and untaxed sectors while solid humanity 20 also countries top activities to countries lower taxes and emissions that have prices and everything is real for activities not markets catalytic from our production and emissions are global emitters like China and need to make global emissions inevitable decarbonization now is enough to avert extinction that's during 20 there's never really comes around this about the environmental like cost paths transportation food and labor analysis all conversations but so environmental issue because folks under pressure so building not to your own solar energy from CEO autonomous driving AI precision fermentation so yeah they're getting cheaper by the minute all simultaneously mark that simultaneously and unilateral carbon tax or no modeling to Kevin 13 anti-fascinating jurisdiction to less unless there's an international co-op you want actually use communicates to the jurisdiction while nature for this level of support based by advocacy to the people evidence leaders of policy policy to vision operating to share world constantly local policies or constant messages leadership to be the durable effect in the short run mark that at in the short run no warming impact while we're trying to copy was by iodized melting sea levels or serious constitution like institution or glass less figures data for national election worsen temperatures more than degree Celsius to hydrogen not essential report triple solar sharp rockets IEA and trust eliminated batteries use more the energy in the country is sustainable yeah you're going to report into the investment basis for policies over countries for geothermal no food impact that's in Thorstead 22 all as percent food production increase on investments conversations on the yielding tech field regional report after review tech expected to spend opposite comment impact comment made and also levels of warming really throughout the regional next transfer creates only degrees of America curve 21 by degrees in America Creek so in study science innovation their evidence says energy creates opportunities for EU cooperation but zero evidence that China would fracture or not you the Latin America but zero evidence that China would fracture Latin American stability taxes not increase US tax code and trying for all level benefits you less or more than average common sense and policies play time as much as the current RPS statute fuel sanctions of more subsidies to additional types small banks doesn't do enough version because literally which is going to be like current changing access insufficient supply chain resilience makes Chinese leverage in the short term inevitable and leadership requires institutional engagement which is impossible post Trump that's a reality we want to see Alan Trump thumbs tariffs and Latin America internally massive tariffs on Colombia and other countries looking China market dominance at best it's a long-term scenario and thumpers which are inserted and nuclear wars unrelated from China and Latin America and COVID thumbs which is their recutting of the Alice card no Latin American wartime Republican statements reality shows economies of talks on countries only controlling your economy control language versus only your women's and organizations and your security friends and national defense period the 436 million named special objective for businesses are never get idea of policy on Russian around all questionable not supporting your spirit crisis undeniable yeah
Everything conditional.
Yes.
You kick planks.
Steve, we can keep the last plank on stage, right? Yeah, so like the one like after the break is cool, but the first three go together.
The 10 for 1 DA. So this link card is about agencies promulgating regs. The plan is a tax, so it's likely passed by Congress. So what's your link? Well,
Stephen asked in 1AC cross-external means who implements the tax.
Yeah,
John said the IRS.
You asked who administers the tax. We didn't say Congress not involved in plan.
Of course.
Is your impression that the IRS can just pass a tax by itself?
So, okay, right. this is completely our argument. Congress passes a bill that says there's a tax. I'm familiar with Article 1 of the Constitution. And then agencies have to implement that because Congress does not have the power to implement or measure emissions or track who pays the
Perfect.
tax. That
So,
would be the IRS or other
so
agencies.
any act passed by Congress thumbs your DA.
Well, obviously no, right? Because the dissent is, there are a couple reasons for that. One is that we think that there's a particular window for the dissent. Any rules have to be within the CRA look-back window. Secondarily, Trump's XO happened on January 31st, so a lot of the things that Congress and the executive did before then were purposely exempt, which is why Trump did it instead of on January 20th, day one. He did it on the 31st.
Does Trump want to overturn this cyber regulation?
Kind of irrelevant if Trump wants to. There are a couple reasons for that. One is we think that even if Trump himself does not want to, the OMB director Voight is a deregulation hawk. The substance of the policy is not what is important, but rather Trump passed an XO that legally requires 10 regulations to be cut back. For every one regulation that is implemented, it's not only regs, it's agency guidance, interpretations, regulations, new rules, etc. We think that the plan not only would be one regulation of the IRS figuring out how to administer a carbon tax, but a slew. They have to communicate with other departments like the EPA to measure emissions. They have to calculate the
My
ETA.
next question.
It's global. The CBP might be involved.
Next question. Ted Cruz, who does he backlash to? Like, who's the target of his anger?
Probably Republicans, like the majority and slim.
That's not an answer. Is it like Trump? Is it Johnson?
It's like Republicans in the House.
He backlashes
And the
toward the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you would like get mad at them for passing a carbon tax. Like, are you serious?
What's your interest of fiat? The plan has to be who?
Normal means, you said it was Congress, so it at least needs 50 votes. This would probably be, so a Republican would need to bring it to the floor because they control Congress, so that would happen.
So some Republicans have to vote for the plan.
Yeah, is your interest of fiat that the plan is brought to the floor by a Republican and then every Democrat and like 5 Republicans vote for it? That doesn't seem very likely in a Republican-controlled Congress.
How do you think it happens?
If a Republican is bringing to the floor, presumably that's getting some Republican votes. Probably more than the least necessary number. But even if like 4 Republicans have to vote for it, like there's 4 people that Ted Cruz can lay it on. And the margins are incredibly slim. I think it's a 53. So, even if only 4 Republicans have to flip to get the bill passed, like that's enough people to the nomination.
All right, 10 minutes start.
I can cut it.
Oh no, that's not. That's just for this. Yeah.
Yeah, within this county, that's gonna get that too.
Well, that's here. That's
Not really.
okay. Then yeah, grab that.
Okay. 9 minutes.
Actually, start.
You have all the papers you need, right?
Yes, I do.
$8:35. Have we stopped that?
I was running your time.
That's right.
Yes, and should be sent. Okay, warming advantage, innovation advantage, T, spec, states counterplan, the Ted Cruz nominations DA, 10-for-1 regs DA, Russia relations. So warming, innovation, T, spec, states, nomination, Ted Cruz DA, 10-for-1 regs DA, Russia relations. As a panel, I'll have the doc.
I need to set this down, right, sorry. Good.
And BK, are you good? I should say you good.
Great.
Graham, ready?
Yep.
Alright.
Subsidies sold for fossil fuel subsidies, they correct for propping up fossil fuels will lead to low cost switches, which is strong to rising prices stalls eventually overpower subsidies as battles extend. The Beers evidence, it cites a consensus of models from international support that shows that subsidies are declining now to over 330 billion, but they only have a small impact when compared to carbon pricing. Rosen argument about not locking in is wrong. All sectors get hit by pricing residuals, deep decarbonization, no lock-in subsidies leave on the gas switch, which rising price makes an unlimited, which is lash off. Subsidies solve any other barrier like permitting and transmission, since they can scale microgrids and batteries require less land and approval. Paris feels as an app argument. BC is key to strong our pricing adjusters and Buckner renewable scale argument. Subsidies also solve harsh debate sectors since they scale commercial innovation technology now, which is the Chong evidence. The Azard evidence is ridiculous. One, yes, data product level emissions are tracked by dozens of databases and imports disclosed or lower the tax export evidence. Foreign domestic consumption is solved since the price equivalent embraces the adjustment, which is the whale evidence. Cite your model does not assume a CBAN, which prevents leakage, increasing mitigation, which is war from no warrant for minimal mitigation. This card is literally a word salad. The BCA will also spur forward pricing as well. The Moran evidence, leakage is solved by the BCA in untaxed sectors or solved by fiat, which was cross-tax. BCA solves global emitters via a follow-on since it speaks the economic language that they care about. The renewable scale argument is ridiculous. Once renewables are additive now, CO2 is an externality in sectors only laxly not clean energy, which is not quick enough. That's the whole house evidence. Two, everything matters. The plan can only add renewables and they're fossil dependent now, which can't solve warming. Three is China. US renewables are not fast enough to outcompete, which is the Allen evidence. Emissions are high. They increased since 2020, which is Spangenberg. Circumventing impact events. Renewables are too slow and additive now, which is Spratt and Holthaus. 5 degrees is coming from tipping points in carbon sinking failure. Low emissions is a false sense of security because tail and risks are likely, which is the Lenton evidence. Reject adaptation. Growth is low now, including uptake dropped in the legacy. It crowds out investment productivity, preventing scale, which is Spangenberg. It's also politically costly, which is the thesis of all their DA links, warming out waste levees and seawalls from extreme effects, which is the Lenton evidence. Yes, trends, heat days of double CO2, which is Spratt. Natural variability fails. Temperature and CO2 closely correlate, which is Lenton. Food shortages go nuclear. Circumvents defense because fish are key to state and civil stability. Riots cause loose subsidies and drawing ensuring extinction, which is that evidence. Their indictment of crib evidence is ridiculous because it's just talking about how he was a qualified classicist, but he is also citing research that indicates that research origins would lead to war. Yes, impact warming. 1, maybe say earthquake. 2, coffee, human competition issues, nuclear war, competition over dwindling food and water right, nuclear resource wars. 3, salinity rising sea levels affect our fresh water, which is the Spangenberg evidence. Advantage 2. China will shut off their energy now, which means they do have an incentive to trigger the internal link to the advantage because it gives them geopolitical power in the region. We fill in for innovators with cash, which means that the plan does solve through increased uptake of renewables. The plan solves Chinese supply chain resilience by leapfrogging them. The Allen evidence says we can invent new batteries that don't rely on their supply chains. No inserting thumpers. You should reject them until the block reads them orally. COVID does not thump our internal link scenario, and it's also not an impediment to war because the region is primed for conflict since it weakened their economies and resiliency to external shocks. Yes, Latin America war. Our evidence says that the region is primed for violence now. 2018 defense does assume the increasing presence of China in the region through renewable influence. Hospitality. Contribution to NBS on the charge of counter trace on United NBS address externalities due to charge of like proxy market prefer one is after the best mechanism defense center taxes to responsibility. A reasonable assessment of the NBS literature includes that taxes, T arbitrary smooth killing clash, and crap 3 functional limit solves restates oil politics and candidate for reasonability option. People to be T with yes no defense to prevent substance crowd out spec contribution. The app must be topical against good faith enforcement ball play. Maybe prefer one app ground where cards advocate tax specifics in depth heavily defending every angle simultaneously. Those arguments shouldn't have 100% win rate since it's unfair to teach debaters nothing good ever happens to cross apply functional limits and reasonability. You should be prepared to pay tax. States. Permanent both issues that benefit because the diffuses blame for the plan. Permanent the Catalan state federal fiat voting issues unfair legitimizes Lopez picked up deficit and zero literature voting education. There's article go for one there of fiat strike. Can't solve one strike down for the common cost of the team more comes consequence of the constitution by trade limit state taxation refreshing from the word like the shut down by some more from the most goes border racial obligation be import export clause course 23 import export clause processing for listing includes imports import limit that to imports in foreign countries that matters. It causes leakage with zero's warming solvency and it also fails limits others to act on climate change, which is the melting evidence. Uncooperative BCA plank fails if they win their politics link, but they still have to win states and constitution board tax, otherwise it'll be shut down right. We have a market does not mean every market between state and laws may fit the federalism in discretion case market with violence from the authority. Beyond 13 jurisprudence, in these cases, bad market will be weak down judicially. The Fed will draw support across states at Ramsey 24. Yes, many states go to with Fed, Trump, and social this year, waivers instead. On fiscal levels, to ensure they don't call hovers just strong, still needs federal dollars and Trump's whole Medicare. The state would sue and blame, but in the meantime, tremendous damage to be inflicted for $1 dollars from DC and also recover states that push back and continue pulses their way. 3 delay, laggard carbon tax, constant short-term pump and dump of fossil fuels without an immediate price of your extraction, which is the lithium evidence, also applies to other countries as well because it threatens or doesn't threaten the BCA, but says it is coming in the future. Condos of voters, strict terms of keeping tweezing strategy, punish at your responsibility, disincentivize shallow research, dismal solves, and keep the assets per 3. Cruise DA, space call this means to reduce accident rates for 23. If they tell the only possible about only the pressing risk of pandemic, what estimate risk of 10,000, but overall risk of 1 in 600 scale, something like protect against risk, supercharged machine can control life, finding something by a few marching colonists and group of scientists have leisure to innovate their skills. Every human earth cannot transport the pathogen, they are hardly ground, they full drama, and the risk consequence the GOP unity is dead now. No bank 3 for the 1 Republic stock, loss of election, GOP control the Washington Council, trade growth, first cracks back, unity, biker, watch push back against plans for from Europe, also single chatting card, GOP call up with to resign until we put Tomas on it. Niagara pushing back and vote by proxy. Slender 325, the House Representative finding flexible voted subsidy, solve link 425, the active carbon tax most important ways issues interest groups to decide national policies, which is and it's 2 interest groups incentivizing clean tech policy for the policy, grid issues, supply, blue outlets, carries by 16 days, looking at thumbers now, Kaminsky 331, says bill, injunction bill, and CFPB rollbacks with examination budget, cut at budget. There's obviously, Cruz could be mad over anything else in the House is contemplating, including cutbacks to the big bill, which thumps the disadvantage as well, the 10 for 1 DA. The link is ridiculous. It's about regulations. Trump is obviously signing any executive order, including birthright citizenship and everything that got passed on day one. The thing that it requires him to overturn 10 regulations is thumped down intrinsic to the plan. Fiat also solves link when he's Anderson 25 could exempt coverage rules that represent priority to Trump. No cyber impact group legislation 24 any tax exchange vibes by military escalation. Alongside prior changes these no longer more temporary actions. The U.S. on top of tax against Iran and move strikes after streaming border crisis response to the awarding experiments. Cyber operations do not necessarily defeat cyber responses. Here's a range of options and providing mutual market space cleaning offerings and alternatives to military forces not intrinsic because the logical policymaker could just not abolish regulations that are key to cybersecurity. No leadership impact that Western 20 the world debating this week's cut. Forged throughout the 90s, that given our visibility, Africa is peaceful, something which has great stability, has been which has the English advice suggests that U.S. wants to be the importance of the controlling factors independent to government situation box and approaches the world. Continue peaceful ways no matter what. Can't debt climate solvency as well, which was the case page because carbon pricing outweighs anything the regulations currently affect, and the price would apply to those actions as well.
Do you want to read a number?
Yeah, Thumbers, Battery 45. When issued in first, take the board and killing the law firm, Blue Computers and Shots, take the board, just given more 12 6 days after Trump issued his first order.
And that's the other. This is going to be the other page.
Okay. Russia relations. Trump destroys relations with everyone with 25. Second Trump is under my core security policy showing that his relationship with nations and trade policy based on ever shifting factual claims, no link the plan credits other countries, non-pricing policies bill 20. That's the 1AC whale evidence that encourages not inhibits cooperation. NC25 BCA is making sure cooperative weakened by little efforts minimize risk for our BCA that this effective prices less likely to product for backlash of approach about lines more close affairs and affect BCA connect countries. Unique circumstances and sovereignty acknowledges rights of each to address common zoning circumstances affect BCA is less reducing competition. Countries that struggle to explicitly price made less opposed BCA that credits affect prices warm against military on the 19 companies to military sell. Like last Pentagon like collapse due to climate change, increased energy requirements triggered by new weather patterns could overwhelm fragile systems just much for foreign interventions and combat due to climate change, military capacity against threats responding to climate abuse, capacity to injury threats will into a mission failure abroad, arms control fails, adversaries abuse process doctrine with because arms control reflects relations groups are only accomplished by arms control as the history of failing ABM led to the Soviet Union to increase offensive diplomacy that coincided with the fall into Russian shape to solve one failed Russia abuse arms control to advance with physical goals, long-term with European US and China. Lack of arms control should be no surprise in place. The US and the disadvantages cannot ignore treaties with Russia. Nuclear cuts make both arsenals vulnerable to conventional counterforce and nuclear war. Lever 19. Nuclear cuts would determine by deterrence of the light damage proof of its accuracy, remote sensing, cut at remote sensing, economic exchange checks on year 23 to arms race between Russia and US seems unlikely, which also more likely to design with the enormous cost of the nuclear arsenal of Russia. Targeted by sanctions, it's already slowly struggling to maintain official stockpile. It seems unlikely that necessary resources would be available in economic consideration when the US nuclear bill to be really likely to nuclear arms system not be expected to economic reason for Russia to expand its arsenal of time. Immense political, diplomatic, and environmental costs make nuclear weapons likely. ready for your defense. War by miscalc has been shocking 23 across 80 years incorporated U.S. and Soviet arsenals in less developed countries. There have been few accidents and led to escalation. Case 75 no common examples. Like study from 1400 to 1895 did not turn a single case far from being fragile balance and nuclear age should make great caution to leading military control things rather than the evidence from the back isolation of Berlin, the Hungarian oppressing US and Soviet Union really sentiment is even one more states shoots these gas there's a lot of bad reactions to US mission bombs and bombs red line against chemical weapons even Trump is back and way at great cost of striking Iran. Go back to advantage one. Warming costs of meltdowns and loose WDs 124 once Mr. Rise reactions built on never no condition is communication for centuries bound to be 100 years with collapse giving some leak out rapid scenario. And acidification kills phytoplankton. Extinction gram alpha 19 over 50% of oxygen comes out of phytoplankton for long no other generation of oxygen reducing 5 health and acidic balance of oceans at risk from CO2. Stay on the case page. The plan solves the debt crisis. Government is unsustainable now. Pressures knee-jerk program coming. Absent increasing deficit to all 25 interest in debt exceeds 1 trillion. The world described government is unsustainable. Can go on forever. It will stop the questions whether this will be investigated in the core functions in orderly manner. Whether public fashion until the council walk down. You got fashions extinction. Say the 20 inflation. U.S. hijack the politician. Whether it's going to AI by people to using things like a company. The more can say I knew about doing corporate China. AI security evaporates. And carbon tax stalls. Healing 24. People say what level of debt can probably do it. Doesn't fucking the one so the versus then you're dead. We're not going to balance budget. We're taking 15 trillion, but there's nothing as helpful as a pressing carbon. You can't raise enough. You do other things in addition to reducing your debt. So this is promising.
You send all that?
Working on it right now.
So I sent the thumb creases in the body. It's also in the doc that I sent. The doc that I sent includes also includes the miscalc part.
Yeah. Extra, extra dishes,
I tried to save it as Twisty Extra and it was like it's taken.
Yeah, let me just copy paste these cards into the rest of the Twisty doc. But I really am not prepping on that.
I just sent my stuff.
Okay. Miscut part of it. Okay, wait, let me wait for John's stuff as well. Let me copy paste that. Okay. You're good?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start on the 10-for-1 dissent. The first argument was that the link is about regulations. So your argument, therefore, is that the plan results in no regulations, just a law by Congress, and agencies take no action after that?
Yes.
How do you expect to solve? Like, who implements the tax? Who
Okay.
measures emissions?
This is
Administers the
actually
subsidy?
like crazy that this is the interpretation of your evidence you're promulgating. That's kind of ironic because it's an agency DA. But like your card is like when the president issues an executive order or an agency does a regulation, like based on a statutory interpretation, that has to trigger rollback of 10 other things. The plan passes the carbon tax statute. The only thing it requires of like the IRS is like
the only
on your
fiated-
tax
I
return, you have
understand
to
that the
figure out how
only-
much carbon.
Right.
Possible.
I understand that the fiated mandate of the plan is simply that Congress passes a law. Is your argument that there would be no follow-on or effectual regulations that occur?
If there are, like agencies are going to promulgate regs, period. Like there's no possible way that if that is what the DA becomes, you can win uniqueness for it.
Okay.
Or Trump's gonna sign another executive order, or I mean, you get the gist.
Sure. Politics, subsidies solve the link. Which interest groups?
What do you mean? Like it
Like
creates
this
a
part says that it
huge-
would shift interest group perspectives.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
Who does it convince?
So like, if a company is highly invested in fossil fuels, they could start innovating green technology to diversify their portfolio. They would take their money out of the pockets of like right-wing senators, for example, because it boosts investment in their portfolio and in regions that senators care about. Like Texas has a bunch of like wind energy, but they're super red. So
Okay. Sure. I want to talk states for a second. I understand that you've read cards about like things that exist that, like the import-export clause. Where does it say like will strike down on this basis?
read the name of the author.
Sure, I understand it's about a different case, like what card indicates that this would be likely in the instance of a carbon tax?
I mean, read the author. This is the standard that the Supreme Court set.
Okay, I don't understand if this is about imports from foreign countries that appears to apply to a BCA but not a domestic carbon price. What's the link?
If it was, well, so we've also read a second piece of card that's like if it results in follow-on, that would be struck down because it's an impermissible policy that the states are foisting upon the Fed.
Okay, that I guess makes sense. The Thumpers argument on 10 for 1, it says like what firm was passed, the law firm was the
I don't
only
know
one?
what you're asking me.
Like this thumper
it's
card
a-
only seems to have one thumper. Do you believe that there are others? It says it's talking about Trump's XO like hurting the law firm.
Are there any others in that card there?
I know, it's just that one.
And we'll start time.
Audience requested that their charge is all DC panel on the yellow. You live within, around, we haven't been there because we don't have No, it's the name of the restaurant. No, colors generally don't say pizza for them. I was confused about that part, are you also yes on Iowa?
Yeah, and like I said, Bucky's also very good.
Wait, sorry.
So in the evening, it turns into a pizza place that's missing people. I would recommend Beach for some reason.
I thought it was just a pizza. I mean, yeah, I'm a block, but they're right on the edge of like the Georgetown concert. Oh, really? Yeah. It's very possible that you live within like 700 feet of one another.
Yeah, I like that area a lot.
It's like, I look at the area.
Yeah, it's nice. I just think that.
Yeah, I don't, Georgetown isn't much for me.
That's so
Funny happens, you go to school there, and so it's first down. I like the DuPont area a lot, you know, like talking about leadership stuff, it's more like.
So just think these games are all because it's so small, like compact. It's like very easy to get from one neighborhood to another, super nice.
Yeah, I do, it's definitely the first place I've ever lived that has functioning public transportation. That's not the case.
It's not the case in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we graduated. Do you all have this now?
You don't have to so,
No, I can't.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's hard, it's hard to
Okay.
kind
But yeah.
of, do you think it?
I think it's right, yeah, I'm debating.
Also, I have.
I'm going for it. Again.
Further down.
Wait, really? So I'm in, it's my social housing. So that's.
That's important. It seems like.
Where did you mark the
Would get
difference?
stressed.
Yeah.
He doesn't get like,
I'm pretty sure it was like a sentence.
like he cares a ton, but he also just like crafts so
remote
much,
sensors.
like all the time. Good. What?
No, it's like,
Yeah, I haven't done this for a while, but.
that's good. Great. That's good. That's good, right?
Yeah.
That
Who did
one.
y'all?
I was still with Texas.
Who did you lose to?
Mhm.
You know what happened?
Carmen only first strike gave other issues.
Got this
I'm just like framework stuff. I know, it's just like. I don't think we'll just turn it.
Yeah. We need to do one this always that way. It's just like each of us.
Oh my God. Tracy. They said every time. And then said term first strike, give other issues.
Did you say you also read the memo?
Yeah, I remember. Like, I sometimes it's all like, it's like kind of between all of them.
Yeah.
I really like it.
just recently moved
Y'all
over
just-
to like right before you get to West End, right before Sean stops. And like, I love it for their stories, that's what you're saying, it's just like you're easy to walk down.
That's about-
There's so many things that look good too, like I really just, like the public library in West End.
Oh, yeah.
Stop
Or
at
like,
five.
call your mother
Yes.
slash the
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
Which is
I
fine.
know that. That's on today's night.
Yeah.
It's nice to have like 5 o'clock. So I really like most of the time, but no, I love that part of it a lot.
Who's it?
Sorry.
I'm really jealous of that chips and guac.
So just go away? You
Yeah.
can't have any,
Looks pretty tasty.
in case.
Oh, I wasn't asking.
Me on the other hand. I'm your boss.
It's true, you literally are.
As your boss,
I'm a pathetic wage here.
It was done. The order will be the state's comp plan, the emissions advantage, the innovation advantage.
Could say
Kansas, you good?
Almost.
Okay. Cal?
I need,
Yeah, no,
I
I
need one
didn't realize you were
chips
mid-shit,
worth
my
of
bad.
time. Go for it.
All right. Kicking the pitfall one plank, which shows all the reason multi-active field is bad, but the counterplan solves the case as if 50 states adopt uniform standards identical to the plant's carbon price, which is more than sufficient to resolve their emissions and terminal lengths. It also scales up the same renewable type portfolio, and they don't have a reason that fit is case for the 2AC, which means there's only a reason the counterplan at least solves the vast majority of the 1 he said to offend permeate both lengths. It still includes a federal carbon tax, which restricts the length of one our shielding more was undeveloped. We give new answers from the one of your explains Herm to counterplan substitutes G. Thompson and 7 that the Fed gov refer to the central government federal terms from the 50 states can't be the states across the West Virginia 21 in the US. The term FG refers to the government of the national level, states being subnational. Now they say strike down. Foreign and foreign commerce clauses are both wrong. One, the counterplan does not tax imports and link this Chinese. Congress will try to interfere. Republicans pretty more likely. It's unlikely to include about federal. It will say to make this rich actually, I won't read that card, but it does not, the counterplan, their deficits don't assume uniform fiat arguments apply. That's Martin and 18. Courts have recognized foreign commerce clauses an overall aspect, compelling justification to state, being officially discriminating against forced commerce. The case law, their evidence cites, applies as apples and oranges. The court has only struck down 2 state taxes ever on DFCC grounds. Those taxes apply to foreign products but excluded domestic projects, which is not the counterplan. Nolan Mason and 21. The court will determine interstate commerce clause matter of circumstances that did not carry over the DFCC. The court has evaluated only 2 taxes under the DFCC. The tax actually discriminatory inclusion of foreign but not domestic dividends. The court has not considered DFCC in the sense of mid-2000s. This means there's no possible legal argument against a carbon tax. All versions of the carbon commerce clause, dormant, active, inert, hibernating, whatever, are designed to prohibit policies that discriminate in interstate trade. The need to explain how a uniform tax by all states would accomplish that will be the only evidence that assumes uniform fiat activity. In 19, we didn't report to court to find discrimination of a carbon tax was equally imposed regardless of whether they were produced domestically or out of state, because such tax is not discriminated against out of state reduced therefore within the boundaries of the state's authority. Gorsuch has dismantled the DC. The Supreme Court sought to return the court nearly the right to challenge the state. The laws that burden interstate commerce led by the Gorsuch court, ruling that DCC holds state laws do not allow without proving not discriminating because California commerce will regulate the same ways nationwide competitors court, but it did not matter cost the non-California businesses. Domestic carbon taxes survive every prong of a carbon clause challenge. Conic in 19, the test for determining constitutional taxes under DCC and taxes reply to activity next with the state, but fairly portion not discriminate, and the tax related the extent the taxpayers conduct with the state, the appropriate rate is right for the legislative non judicial resolution. The first part does not require fiscal purposes and access. This when the subject of the tax carry out business of the state, the tax would pass the fair portion of power because it proposes the tax bill in and out of the state electricity the same. This is similar to corporate income taxes. Tax will survive so long as it shows that it does not discriminate between in and out of state electricity produced applies everywhere. Everywhere there's no additional burden on absolutely reduces that advantage. Account for not even a core found proposal discriminating in effect. It's like the same scheme would pass the compensatory tax so long as out of state and it's produced the same tax based on high level details. It seems that bill would be able to withstand challenges under the DCC. Framing issue for their strike down evidence is that none of it is predicted. They have evidence that says that it could be argued, but they have no evidence that the federal government has a desire to preempt or strike down the counterplan in the strike down the counterplan in the future, which proves that there's only a risk that the counterplan at the least resolves the vast majority of their offense. They say it causes leakage, and we answered our case, but the counterplan obviously does not necessarily trigger leakage because it does not trigger leakage because the 50 states adopting a carbon tax, continually raising price means that they can necessarily scale down production but adopt green tax, which means that means that U.S. emissions are sufficient. Now, conditionality is good. Counter-interpretation, we did against new undisclosed plans, which are voted for predictability. All clear on prep. It's based on disclosure. 30 minutes before the debate. 1. Netflix app. Sandbagging, side bias, and infinite prep means the net means more conditional applications for reactive ground. 2. Argument experimentation solves risk version. And instead of new argument positions, it's heated critical thinking and testing. There's no offense. 1. No skew. It's natural. From fast speaker, short keys, and teeth. First, Tracy. Choice add-ons and overlapping argument check. 2. Dispo fails. Incentivizes backfire generics. Allows Tracy to dictate that strategy. And there's no community consensus. I don't have to answer the rest of the deficits because they were to the plank that said the federal government should be NDT. Warning. Carbon taxes fail. 1. Federal tax breaks and subsidies offset the economic effects of the plan. Taxing without any subsidies gets canceled out or costing a negative price, which is Kong. The Beers card is terrible. It uses 5 models with assumed variables. Kong just proves their false fuel subsidies declining now argument. And since it results in a negative carbon price, which swaps the plan's price signal direct and indirect subsidies, swap the plan the U.S. delves up over $20 billion per year directly COVID-19 numerous subsidies exist in tax code. Current subsidies make probably check all reserves include direct as well as tax benefits. Sort of estimates from direct $20 billion subsidies, increasing China, U.S. and Russia. Their studies are global, but their studies do not necessarily price in the United States. 2. States will adopt offsetting subsidies. See percentage when a decision level important in determining protection of the state that feels effect. Policy stewardship can seek offsetting impact. Policies lower the burden, for example, effect carbon tax. State can adopt offsetting subsidies to increase profitability and reduce the impact of the tax. 3. Carbon. 3. MBIs incentivize efficiency measures and gradual conversion. Some cost by firms and households makes large-scale transformation infeasible since they want to recoup their investment. Even if they reduce demand for fossil fuels, it lowers the price and causes the rebound effect, which is coordinated. Some cost financialization and greater privatization mean economic incentives fail. Fossil fuel companies will run their products into the ground now. And 15. Most plans feedback firm will keep it in operation as long as possible for capital level 10 on asteroid of literally the planet of value informing is limited to 2 degrees while cheaper in the long run higher initial cost of decision enhanced private age too little too late financialization made investors on 50 bank transition average shock over 22 seconds by long-term renewals with little guaranteed revenues greater than utilities privatization renewals offshore by growing businesses separation of fossil fuel realized solely by average beyond economic incentives even extremely high tax rates fail which other countries prove. 4. Non-price barriers infrastructure barriers prevent widespread renewable build out that's coordinated patent listed. 18. Group number energy scholarship does cover prices to non-interest challenges of transition barriers infrastructure major elements of the grid from transmission need to be upgraded or replaced. Also need the infrastructure such as storage but infra is not something carbon prices address. Now they do not solve international emissions. BTAs fail. 1. They're a logistical nightmare. It requires information about hundreds of inputs that are impossible to track or verify, which is there. 2. They're in an ineffective stick. Export to the U.S. make up a relatively small amount of economic activity for other countries relative to global trade. It's more appealing to reciprocally tariff than to introduce unpopular and economy-wide cause, which is their evidence. All of their evidence is hopeful, but is not conclusive. It does not say that large emitters would follow on, and there's no incentive for them to do so because Trump has messed up relations, which is their argument on the dip cap that said 3 other countries don't follow on because their lack of carbon pricing creates industry growth and a source of competitiveness are relative to price of many increasing competitive awareness of our tax efficiency and the climate policy. Treaty is on the book. One is already signaled and willing to restrict we act for countries for themselves to do which is creating new measures against restriction factories running by lack of carbon price regime. India, China, etc. never agreed fossil fuel uses as a source of economic and military poverty and flow. And 25 carbon tax has been very important, very tough, especially China, India, and other countries continue to emit GHG suppression of fossil fuels. Weaken position China, Russia, and Iran. I said they will reduce emissions, but instead to do otherwise. They're obvious. All 3 stronger military and economic terms continue to exploit countries taking the lead in movements toward net zero. Have disappointing track records discourage others from following the implementation of solar wind that increased energy costs contribute to domestic and industrial decline. Global warming continue because China, India, and many other countries strong incentives continue to use fossil fuels. Now, there's in every degree it matters is flawed. Framing issue for their impact evidence. It may list existential threat. It may list warming as an existential threat writ large, but the tail end effects are things they have not read terminal impact cards for generally covered their evidence. And internally to those cards do not say they individually cause extinction. They say cumulatively the effects of warming cause extinction, which proves that only our defense applies at but 1 is empirically denied by 1.3 degrees, which is flow, even if tipping points are invisible, all reputable scientific sources say 2.4 degrees is lower risk to trigger than 2 to be capped at 2.5 in adaptation solves the flow, and 25 acre for warming calculated by natural variability temperature increase 1.3 degrees Celsius, sea level risen, and no change in extreme weather mortality decrease 98% was much better at preventing deaths from climate effects greater well, which provides better advanced warning tech and capacity to recover, cut it at recover. Now the last argument I'm going to answer is the add-ons. Again, these are all tail end risks, which if we prove that warming is not by itself existential proofs that they do not individually cause extinction, but they cannot solve revenue and emissions because the people are paying the tax. Because the people they cannot solve revenue and emissions. There's no impact to food. Adaptation measures like precision farming, check, only taking and 15. The vast majority of studies where main impacts on corporate adaptive measures. State measures are numerous achievable over increasing crop yields, neglecting adaptive capacity, killing investments under 2 missing increasing connectivity, enhance adaptive capacity. Also ignores precision farming, monitor plant growth, nutrient deficiencies, and power conditions. Techniques reduce ag demand for water, substantially reduce water stress. Now, the innovation advantage. Carbon tax is woefully insufficient to solve U.S. tech adoption. The impacts are overstated relative to implicit prices that already exist, which is how AirNag they read zero carbon farming tax and its innovation effects on tech scale up that the U.S. could export. Cost, constitutional, and infrastructure barriers overwhelm innovation. The patent 18 growing number of energy are cross-play that from above. There's no Latin American war. Our evidence is predictive, and since there's no incentive for conflict in the region, the Tuisi plays through this without explaining specific internally for conflict simply because there are regional actors in the area. Does not necessarily mean that those create incentives for conflict, and they have not necessarily said who strikes first, why they strike, or what initiates the conflict in the first place. But there's no green innovation. Study space is limited by deep lock-ins, and even under tax rules movement 28. It's like strong innovation effects actually are review of pricing. Find they have limited opportunity for innovation trajectories. They level business usually in Sweden how to afford to develop pricing practice for pricing. Optimize established models does little to encourage innovation. Investment in carbon intensive infrastructure, ongoing unit pricing system, deep lock-ins, encourage established trajectory. It's a consensus of multiple studies. Stokes and 20. Evidence mix on whether price can drive innovation systems produce incremental improvements. Other research suggests limited innovation in study to use market low carbon tax funding, increase less than 1%. Louis actually evidence pricing reduce innovation and nuclear tech by focusing on the low hanging fruit, the cheapest price. Yeah, cut Stokes at the cheapest ways.
Okay, are you ready for cross-ex?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, kicked uncooperative federalism plank, is that correct?
Correct.
And no others?
No others.
Okay, perm to both links to the net benefit because it includes the FG doing a tax. What does that link to?
The one mark.
Which is what? You have not made a complete argument as of the truancy.
Well, we have dissents that say when the federal government implements a tax, that is bad. I'm not going to tell you what the one mark is.
Okay, so as of the truancy, you do not have a reason that perm to both does not shield.
Okay, we'll give a block speech that will give a reason why the perm doesn't solve. Okay, I kicked the VTA plank, so it could be dip cap because.
Sure, okay, that makes sense. What else?
And then the counterplan does not do a regulation or federal regulation, which means it would be repealed, which means 10 for 1's net.
Okay, so there's no world where this counterplan results in any form of federal carbon tax, right?
No world.
Perfect.
No, I didn't say follow on, that's fine.
Okay, so we're ruling out follow on.
We don't need follow.
Are you all committed to that, ruling out follow on?
Yeah, we don't need it.
Perfect. The case page. Many of the reasons why warming doesn't cause extinction, it's a tail end risk, and humans can always have collective ingenuity to adapt. Why don't those also apply to a nuclear war scenario or a cyber attack on the US or whatever your impact's gonna be?
Yeah, because we know the solution to climate change, and there is global momentum around reducing the scope of climate change, just not in the way the plan says. Our evidence our impacts are inherently unpredictable because they involve the psychological elements of external actors that we genuinely have very little influence over.
So you said one of the reasons why warming will not cause extinction is because there's momentum for increasing green energy now. You've also said that people don't model the plan because they're hooked onto fossil fuels for military and economic reasons. Could you reconcile those arguments?
Yes, they don't model a BCA because they don't the plan is unpopular in their countries, and there's other warrants that I believe I don't remember the author, but our evidence says that it's an unpopular policy. Those countries don't want to adopt. Those countries are scaling down green policy.
2NC warrant for that is because fossil fuels are key to their economies. So
well, I think you're underselling how specific our evidence is to the BCA mechanism. We've said that those countries will not adopt similar reciprocal pricing policies, but they will scale up renewable energy in their economy, and as your evidence suggests, export.
Okay, I'm gonna use the last 30 seconds for that.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, on board meeting and stuff. Yeah, and I'm also not allowed. So just take my records out of the fossil.
We're prepping 8:35. Okay, 8:16.
Okay, I'm setting it.
8:16 again, sorry.
No, he's sick. He's like a trailer park. And he showed up during the picture and was like.
Okay, 7:53.
Sending, the order is politics, DipCat, which was the. Okay. Orders politics, the Isaac Newton Space Cassette, DipCat. The Russia one, and then Thunder one, which was the Thunder one.
Say that again.
One more time, you said, politics, DipCat, which was the Russia dissent, and then Tesla. We're ready? Conceit space called as self-extinction answers any link term plan popular is not cross-linkable to the LD said. 1. Time for one digit relation is legally required. It's not about a political preference. And second, if it's true he does what he wants, the aspirin agenda is comparatively way worse off. There's no world for tiny link, big app, because the smaller the link gets smaller, the app gets 3. It's a requirement to the degree it's a political matter. It flows 9 point isn't charging. It's a deregulation hog, which was the argument at the bottom of the interesting part of the 1 and C. Deregulation is the only way to get Trump Republicans on board with the plan. In 20 this week, carbon tax is service for embrace taxes usually replace existing rates to include Republicans. And Dr. Pence Trump carbon tax will made the agriculture trading tax for lower regulations. DipCat concede arms control fails because countries have an incentive to cheat and concede U.S. arms racing between the U.S. and Russia is unlikely. There's no offense. Plus, those two arguments do not affect the CMC impact, which is about the DIB's cybersecurity. Even if U.S. and Russia will not arms race, they could still go to war with existing weapons. Already uniquest evidence that says that they're cyber attacking us. Warming hurts the military. I'll answer it here. 1. Cannot turn cyber because it's not a physical risk, which is what the cards about. 2. It's true. Its impact. It's years down the line. Out over the next 2 decades. 3. It's all avoidable. Their cards like things like renewables or the bases being hurt. We can just build new bases or build walls around them, or the military can do renewables to solve energy shortages. Miscalc as a myth is not applicable. Our scenario is not miscalc. It was deliberate attacks from countries towards cyber infrastructure with the U.S. must respond to. Their card is only about accidents starting war, but does not answer miscalc during conflict and escalation as far as like stability, instability, paradox, attribution, etc., which is what our 1 and C work evidence was about. 10 for 1. CMMC repeal outweighs and slashes credible deterrence by zeroing out zero response capacity. 1. Scope accesses every internally to global conflict deterrence, allied assurance, first use pressures, and inadvertent nuclear use. 2. Probability adversaries and pro-US systems down. CMMC is the only backstop. It turns case 1. Warming nuclear conflict estimates the environment, increases pollution, index global cooperation. They cannot enforce a carbon tax. But our priority is global conflict and the military is in shambles. 2. China leadership for the Latin America in scenario. Attacks on US DIB, decimate leadership, and allow China unfettered access to Latin America means we cannot do power protection and respond to terrorist nuclear weapons. Specifically, I'm going to extend the ally scenario for U.S. cyber safeguards corrodes the credibility of the U.S. umbrella for allies and adversaries, which raise the risk of nuclear war because they feel the need to take actions by themselves to protect themselves. There was zero defense in this scenario in the 2AC. I explicitly tagged it in the 1 and C, so I don't want new impact in the 1 area. The link debate. The plan ensures regulation. The plan's regulation ensures 10 others are rolled back. It's legally required. The CRA means that Congress has 60 days to roll back any rights from Biden's last days. It limits which right can be targeted, and the PS supercharges it. Congress does not shield the exo applies to follow-on regulations that's sent from other branches implementation. Federal Register, determine new regulations, repeal means they in the future to implement and interpret or prescribe other policy, promises, policy statements. We're also whether the EPA, the Apple trade-off with more than 10 regs. 1, the actual applies to follow-on regs from other branches. For the argument I just read. 2, a single taxation creates dozens of multiple follow-on regs. At a minimum, the IRS can't chalk green policy on their own, so they have to do the interagency agreements. There's a bunch that's coordinated. These 25 examples include tax on carbon, there must be rules that define the use of decarbonization policy, license, carbon accounting, measuring emissions, specific category emissions, and corporations accounting on a 0 to limit leakage among society kind of to interpret also means interpreting what was really interrogating text and the means applying to own internal standards of the administration rely on for verification of other administrative agencies Irish economics alone. 3, it's math. Cruise only lists 46 eligible regs. So even 5 follow-on regs from the affirmative means the entire list is axed, and agencies know it, and they're terrified to make new regs because of it, which was the 1 and C Department of Labor evidence. Now, Anderson evidence citing the Department of Labor, the thumper, 1, issue specific uniqueness. It's simply a fact that the COMC has not been rolled back yet. Factually, it is on the books. That's your tracker. 25 regular versus area 1 expected progressive tracker update COMC introduced. And the window, now the thumpers, second, the window to come to the dissent is narrow. The EU was not in effect until January 6th or February 6th, so anything before that, like day 1 XOs is a non-starter, and LIC 25 EU published February 6th, and the CRA window ends May 12th, so anything after that is also 0, published in 24 CRA window during which structures will be likely on May 12th. Last thing, CRA, now, the link uniqueness is negative. No agency is doing regulations now, even extremely important ones, because they're terrified of having to cut 10. The act is a unique reversal. It forces 10 agencies to cut back, which is the Anderson evidence. There's a regulatory freeze now. 25 year pricing to solid DOG, the direction of value in 1 of a series, and the rating of reset, a temporal one. The initiative, the law firm thumper, bring it up here because that's where the thumpers were. Broadly answered, but this one specifically does not apply. XOs are not agency regulations, guidance, or rules, which is the text of the XO. Anderson, in trying to agency probably new rule, regulation, or guidance. The XO also took away access to government buildings, which requires no agency follow-on for implementation, whereas the affirmative does, which was the Gordon code I just read. The fiat get means the ethics exam is bogus. This is the worst version of attitudinal fiat. Congress like to plan, and I know how to plan, etc. Our link does not depend on attitude towards the gap. It's the law that 10 regs must get repealed when 1 passes. But fiat should not erase backlash. It says, in educational proportional literature, the only thing that it has right now is Trump hates the environment. Prefer least necessary means it would allow Trump and void the directive of OMB to follow their own XO. Trump is section 5 accepted day 1 regs in advance. But the app is not that. That's NLIC in 20. We probably request to reveal it as September in New York. Sorry, institution to approve demonstration for 5 cents to September on 11 APR, which is not the national security, homeland security, foreign pressure, immigration. Yes, impact. Yes, cyber impact. The Twitter cannot go for this. We explicitly tagged 4 scenarios in the 1 and C, and they only answered cyber and miscalc and leadership, which we never even said. Do not allow the one making answers. It even doesn't apply 1. It's net uniqueness. Our arguments with that the status quo is working. So cyber attacks low or we're deterring now is net uniqueness. Second, wrong context. Our scenario was about attacks at military subcontractors. Even if direct attacks on governments fail, adversaries know to target the GIB downstream because they're not protected. 2, 3 does not answer not a perception which can collapse even if attacks fail. They fear the possibility alone, which is work for the wrong. The cyber threats are increasing now. Less responsive. Trying to manage attacks. I mean, definitely doing your financial warfare, man controls metal and TFT, access to machine learning, TMCs, and HASA, and just first of all, to adversarial innovation, TMC, movement, survival, model, and we can set all 5 no defense, CMC, ESP to that, which is the 1 and C cards. Yes, intrinsicness, the link wall demonstrates it, but rejecting is differently aggressive because most is going to be solved through mutual action. The federalized or impact of leadership, and this court says spending cuts don't hurt heads, that's not our internal link, but it's wrong feeling. And second, 25 hours no longer about methods, directing separate sentences, protection, creating, conducting, often, so I do operate against rebels, else, let the social media on familiar officers, successful, like a talk event, and exactly distinguishing the result of the stand. Shall point that as yes, rollback proper text is not sufficient because the new regs could never be implemented, which was the 1 and C form.
753. right, 418. It is sent. What we're waiting on that order is advantage 1, advantage 2. The counter plan. Ten for 1.
Warming was the first advantage, right?
Right. I did not put my flows in order, sorry. Is anyone not ready? Sure. Okay. Is anyone not ready?
Subsidies can't thump their app uniqueness. The plan more than cancels them out via an increase in price. The app literally cannot make them worse. Their kind evidence says subsidies exist, not that they would be increased post-plan, and there are political barriers to that, like gridlock and pro-renewable interest groups. Independently, they don't matter. The IPCC agrees the effect of subsidies is a rounding error and declining as states tighten their belts with 1%, and most far less than the plan. The fact that beers, their Coleman evidence is outdated, not predictive, doesn't assume future trajectory. No state subsidies, there are fiscal constraints like the need to balance their budgets, and again, those are the squoze, so the app cannot make them worse, and the plan subsidy or plan increases, which cancels out, and they drop subsidy solve. No sunk cost. The plan solves by hitting every sector with painful price, causing early plant retirement. Other countries didn't have a big and universal price. Non-price barriers are solved by the app, since the plan incentivizes states to reform their infrastructure because that would supercharge their economies. They've dropped its subsidy solved by leapfrogging. Sunk cost. BCA solves logistical nightmares wrong. 80% of traded carbon already has available data. Consultancies and industry experts solved by filling in. That's work. Even if data is imperfect, we can use sectoral averages. That's our other one easy card. It's more appealing to co-op because nations don't want to be locked out of U.S. markets. So they would model Trump can't thump our internal was not relations. The plan strong arms pricing because if you don't decarbonize, you lose access to the largest economy on the planet. Pricing carbon link turns industry goods because it incentivizes clean energy. The India and China card doesn't assume the plan is also descriptive. The plan causes co-op, not conflict. That's our recent dip card that they didn't answer because it credits other countries for their climate policies. Warming outweighs Venus effects. Positive feedbacks like methane that ice melt will desertify the planet. It'll kick in over the next few degrees, which answers empirics, and the harms rise exponentially with each degree. Adaptation fails. It's so expensive it'll eat growth, removing its own resource base, and tail end risks will kick in before we have time to adjust. That Spratt, Spangenberg, and Glenn, they've dropped the thesis of positive feedback, so we are headed for a hothouse. Earth gets food impact. Adaptation doesn't assume the whole planet getting cooked. Fish are unique because they're the backbone of Chinese regime stability. That's crib dropped ocean salinity flood jobs really causes death from dehydration. Debt outweighs current borrowing rates are unsustainable, resulting in a fiscal crisis where governments are forced to arbitrarily cut back on core functions, destroying U.S. government is necessary to respond to rogue AI, bioweapons, nuclear weapons. And the WD dropped. No new defense of the 2 hours unfair causes sandbagging and breaks the debate, since you can't punish concessions. If you let them say anything about this, you are not qualified to judge another debate. The plan solves. There is quote, nothing so helpful as a carbon tax for reducing debt. That's Huey and Truancy said 5 words on can't solve emissions and debt at the same time. That's not an argument new to understand is unjustified because the elected weren't necessary for complete arguments and deficit to states too, since the block rule that federal follow on IE revenue and it turns their TA regulations cannot be enforced without stable federal revenue that is currently quote unavailable. Advantage 2 not going for a continued impact. Deficits were answered on the other page. Truancy Stokes cites past taxes. Those are sector specific low. We do not have a BCA states counter plan. Purview both solves because it needs states to implement the plan instead of the federal government. If they win now, the Truancy has dropped a deficit. BCAs are not only key because they stop leakage, they are also key because they are the only way to convince other states to model a plan. And the counter plan, everyone ignores it if it is not strong arm adoption of pricing. Every degree matters. So even a few other countries getting on board with pricing are necessary. Cross-apply yes modeling from the other case page. Only a BCA gets other countries to adopt carbon pricing. Stop it in content 24. Temperature the difference emissions and importers instead of producers governments in China, India, and what do they carbon content because what is India? To your proposals careful for domestic customers, unrelated use of policy, Canada, UK, Europe, to compromising Europe, Great Lakes, to comply all, in some countries, with non-discriminatory motivations, are policy in other countries, are quite a few taking a look at compromising, modeling, and in good faith, global good faith, alert, failed use action. It's key to strong arm pricing, volume, probably 21 nations, policy, consider convalescence, responsibility, if you are his, even with the insurance, for the president, just note. Finally, personal would convince life people were below the 1.5 of the house, regulations, and each great world, of course, it's really double conscious different priorities, proper price. Other countries aren't necessary for solving warming because there are two emission sources. Classify the debt add-on, that's a deficit to states too, since federal revenue stays the same after the counter plan. New apps are good, they get coaches, or new plans are good, they get coaches out of the room award. The app for innovation and quick thinking, they drop reasonability, so that's applicable here. The 10 for 1 DA case outweighs no nay card says human extinction from results from nuclear war. So warming first because of infinite future gens, probabilities, ask dialogue, and offerings limit their impact and can't negotiate with the environment. Warming causes geopolitical instability, which turns cyber war, nukes turn cases backwards because winter cools the planet. Durable fiat ensures good faith enforcement and turns case requires to win the whole DA. No ally scenario, they fully drop Trump ruins leadership. On the other PG's a rogue president, and an isolationist which undercuts security guarantees independently thumps the entirety of the DA because nobody will perceive our OCOs as credible, so they cannot deter anything. Thumpers, Congress has passed laws within the past 30 days. Seriously, cross-accept the link threshold through the Ford Trump and certainly sign another XO. Congress passed something, it's inevitable because they said any action guarantees the cyber right gets axed in the doc. I've attached a link to the congressional record. If you follow that, it will say that literally dozens of bills have passed. That's good because it checks an absurd DA, which we could not have possibly been prepared for. Fiat still has the link. The court says Trump and exempt certain exos from the 10-for-1 requirement. Fiat requires Trump to support and pass the plan. And it also says incoherent, abnormal means. So I can support the app and exempt it. It's not uneducational. And it also incoherent because the plan cannot pass without Trump support. The cyber impact 1 controlled studies. They're the gold standard because they can control confounding variables. Over 400 trials show cyber attacks provide a crisis offering during tensions. They don't cause retail. Our article was not cyber attacks low. It's that they don't cause extinction or escalation. Attacks on subcontractors make escalation less likely because they're less sensitive targets, and proves that states consciously avoid escalation, which also assaults their first use offense. There is zero incentive to hack a CNC equipment because that would risk a nuclear war. This is offense Shinson 24. Groups involving cyber response show reduce escalation. Cyber response is the least extraordinary escalation. This reduces 92% effects robustly. Find a mechanism for cyber options facility de-escalate finding and substitute offerings conventional options. If we win the thesis that cyber attacks do not cause war, we control their internal links to all of their other impacts that they cite from the 1 and C because it proves that they provide a process offering and don't escalate to empirics, Ukraine, India, Pakistan, US, Iran, all deny escalation. Roche 23. The cyber attack is the same soldier, even Russia, single computer systems can be restored if you need focal volumes far. Simpler attacks and greater extensive habit. Recent monitoring kinetic connector, immediate long lasting cyber is a little more than show 3. Damage is reversible, small, and exaggerated for thick. James 24, 25 years of death. Cyber attacks are new. These causing storms, research, sharing, and part of anything clever. I'm reading escalation with the chicken. Whether you look at the attack in the grid or the city, Ukraine, cyber wars, the world, the part of the fight, fixed paper, urban recovery, constitution, complete cyber option, conservative state, belief, attacks, specific escalation, research, conditions, temperature, otherwise exaggerated. Claims for a clue. I have a cross-applied miscalculation, it's not an impact, accidental worse to file watching evidence. The historical record finds 0 examples. States can always step back from the rank. That's shocking evidence. Our court does not assume cyber attacks, but it assumes the terminal of escalation spirals.
Right. There, yeah.
So silly. For sure. Did not see it.
I'm so sorry.
Is everyone good for order? The order will be the state's counterplan, the 10 for 1 year, the emissions advantage.
No, no.
Yes,
There's one.
That's our, that's our.
Did everyone get it?
It's not loading for me.
Almost. Alright. I'm sorry, just yell. Counterpoints holds the entirety of the case, hence the states uniformly adopt the same tax and subsidies as the plan, which is wildly sufficient to resolve warming their internal generic and do not require federal action framing issue for the deficit. Kansas has zero card that quantifies the impact of leakage or the specific incentive other countries would have to model the plan, and we're super contesting it on the case, which our evidence is phenomenal on. The Twinsie said getting locked out of U.S. markets was non-unique because of existing tariffs, which means the impact of the deficit is tiny, and no counterpoint rapidly scales their emissions to resolve any of their channel of risk, and they conceded the impact calculus that said even if those that says none of their evidence says those impacts alone are terminal, it says warming itself cumulatively affects us, which means you know that our impact is massive and outweighs the case permutation. One, they dropped it, they did not justify new explanation, they did not have a developed shooting more than the Twinsie speech to scratch it, but it's not told the net benefit because it still results in federal regulation, and there's no possible scenario for why it could shield the link. Now, the last argument I need to answer on here is the dead add-on, because all of the answers to the deficit will be done on the advantage, answering modeling, but DA turns it, shutting down digital economic channels, cyber tech, timber tech retaliation makes economic collapse inevitable and makes it impossible to resolve debt crisis. It means that the plan cannot ever be resolved. That means that the plan can never scale up quickly, but the affirmative definitely cannot solve it fast enough to resolve debt, and the tax cuts obviously thump now the DA. I'm going for the alliances scenario. Scratch the entire 1AR. The 1NC flagged it, 2AC dropped it, and 1NR preempted it. It allows the worst version of late-breaking debates that always serves the app. Hold that line at the NDT. The scenario outweighs 1 probability and time frame. We only need to win that Allied Sphere attacks the USDIB and subcontracts. 1NC works as the credibility of the US strategic arsenal heavily weighs on our allies, and that they will take matters in their own hands if they don't like what they see in the US. 2 magnitude war would involve every actor that conceded Russia, China, Iran, and Norco are attacking the US now. It involves every nuclear great power. 3 flips, try or die. The CMC is in place now, which creates impact uniqueness, and there's only a risk that the app causes rollback and flips, try or die, because you know the status quo is stable, so voting out can only worsen things, and you must try to revert the CMCC at any cost. Yes turns to warming. 1 nuclear conflict decimates the environment, even if 1 attack destroys biology, triggers air pollution, and wrecks adaptability. 2 even small-scale attacks attack cooperation of climate, which they said was key on stage. 3 enforcement becomes impossible. Yes, they can do durable fiat, but tracking emissions, issuing subsidies, and building renewables become impossible. Nuclear use at any level risks extinction through nuclear winter, compounding other risks, which starts a warming scenario. This is justified because the 1AR said new should have been in the 2AC and no 2AR enters Pamela and 15 destruction in other major cities. Oh, boy, my computer actually just. Sorry. 333. Destruction and death of major cities across the world due to explosion of nuclear winter would plunge temperatures below freezing. Also destroy ozone layer, risk severe and almost confirmed analysis even a smaller nuclear conflict would trigger nuclear winter desegregation of food supply, masturbation, state collapse, extinction become possible where recovery becomes impossible. Humanity succumbs to other risks such as pandemics. And now Trump cannot love alliances, prefer issue specific uniqueness. Our internal evidence says allies trust our cyber capabilities now because of the CMMCC, which is a way more, which is far more interesting, or which is far more explanatory. An internal link now. Thumbers are wrong. They dropped everyone in our answer. All of their stuff is old and all of this stuff is old and does not assume the link. Now, fiat solves the link. The plan should not get to be exempted. Framing issue. They conceded that this has an intrinsic opportunity cost to the app that is in the literature. It shields our offense because it is evidence in germane. Our terms that fiat shouldn't erase backlash. Just says it's uneducational and devotional literature because the best neg research, because the only neg literature is Trump hates green policy. It destroys that ground. We don't get politics links about the plan's perception or industry backlash with the economy. Plus, there's no basis for the plan's exemption. Our evidence is clear. There are only a few categories, and they did not make an argument. The plan falls under 1. The 1AR contained no justification for their model. They just said it wasn't educational, which hold the line, which was answered well. You should hold the line on new 2AR. Now there was zero interpretation of fiat that gets Kansas out of the strategic mistake of answering this decided incorrectly. It is a legal mandate that when 10 regulations or when 1 regulation is issued by an agency, 10 regulations must go. We are winning the terminal uniqueness question for what the factual law is in this debate, which means there's only a risk of our offense. Now they conceded that more than 10 would go, which is our 1NC evidence that says that DOL is preemptively not issuing new regulations to the status quo because they know they would have to identify 10 for each regulation that goes, which means it's not necessarily just 1 for 10, it is 3 for 30 or 4 for 40, which proves that there's only a risk of our terms climate offense and means that the only risk of that internally is true. There's no other external offense on the page in their impact defense is just incorrect. It is all just fear-mongering about there have been cyber attacks and those have not escalated, but it's not future predictive and says that future cyber attacks won't be worse. Our evidence is far more specific and says that measures like the CMMCC prevent escalation in the status quo, and none of their evidence is assumptive of it. It presumes the checks that we have now, which is our internal equal hold, which only we have specific and comparative evidence on. Now, the warming advantage. There are no countries that will agree to a carbon price. They've dropped the 2NC D'Angelo evidence, which is phenomenal, and from this year, and says that other countries would never apply it. It says China and India would continue to emit GHGs and suppression of their fossil fuel would weaken position. China, Russia, and Iran will say they reduce emissions but have incentives to do otherwise, and they just don't have a great card that on this advantage that is conclusive. Now, every degree matters is flawed. You should be incredibly skeptical of their internal link because we read the best studies from 2025 and it says that it'll be capped at 2.5 degrees and adaptation solved, even if it is costly. There's no reason why humanity would not do it if it is occurring. There's no reason they don't have an external impact based on this, and it's only a risk of our offense. Now, the D'Angelo evidence is the best evidence on this question. It says that temperatures have increased about 1.3 degrees Celsius, and that sea level rise has risen, which makes their tail end risk argument both non-unique, but 2, not extinction level, because they're rapidly scaling. Because it does not say they're rapidly scaling, and there's no evidence that contributes that connects economic losses to warming. They've also dropped the 1NC Gordon evidence, which says that we've experienced far higher instances of warming we've experienced far higher rates of warming in the past, but that has not been overwhelmed by their internal link. The debt argument is just not relevant because we have said that the DA accesses it and the counterplan necessarily resolves debt in the U.S. economy.
Was it 417?
417. So correct.
Yeah.
Wait, didn't they win last year?
I think this is like a 4-peat or something.
I never mind, I take it back, that's boring.
They've won, I think, the last 4 times.
Women's definitely. Just, I was kidding. Oh, she didn't win.
Maybe I'm wrong. I can double check.
I think it's the first time they've won since 2016 is what it's like.
Women's UConn?
Oh, yeah.
That's what the New York Times said last night. All right, that's kind
Yeah,
of
they've
fun.
just been like the final 4.
It's been like 10 years. It's pretty good.
All right, warming advantage, states counterplan, 10-1 DA. All three judges good? Good. BK, yeah. All right. Debt outweighs everything. Current borrowing rates are, quote, unsustainable and cannot go on forever. U.S.'s interest is exceeding over $1 trillion, and the only question is whether we can generate enough revenue to, quote, protect core government functions, including WD control, military preparedness, loose nukes, AI safety, bioweapon facilities, and infrastructure. Those are all existential. There's literally a ticking time bomb before our debt forces the government to cut back on funding for necessary state functions that ensure the next superbug crazed terrorist or forgotten about nuclear facility starts the chain reaction to extinction. Stanley says this is an X risk factor and hijacks global attention from all other issues of importance. Magnitude first, extinction is guaranteed in the status quo that acts as infinite future value. None of their TA impact cards say extinction, so it is truly die or die. But the U.S. House in order per cautionary principle also shapes debt impacts. Tracy Keohane says if we are not sure when debt will force pullback in government spending, but humanity is like a frog in boiling water, slowly getting hotter until the key barrier to extinction is removed by fiscal hawks exercising rogue arbitrarium. Turns the DA regulations on the books mean nothing if there's an empty office behind enforcement for the statute. The status quo ensures cobwebs and dust are the prime time regulators of the greatest regulatory state on earth. None of the warming impact defense matters conceded. I respect the Toronto's attempt at coming back, but they have dropped every theoretical reason they do not get new defense to debt. It's sandbags debate makes it unfair for the absence today can drop impact scenarios with no punishment mechanism. It probably means the affluence every debate since they speak last. But at that point, debate has already been destroyed. There's no purpose of doing the activity if we cannot punish strategic concessions. But I don't trust judges at the NDTs. No offense, but I will answer their arguments anyway. But the presence of an argument is not indication of justification for the neg. The DA does not access debt. It is about regulations, but has no internal links to funding. Those are the strings collected by Congress, not the regulations that are promulgated that they say we cause overturn of, but has zero internal link to funding whatsoever. Kettlebell solves this valiant, but totally wrong. Nothing about the kettlebell gives them money to the Fed. They ruled out follow on to Twin C crossings and interpreting the kettlebell this way for them is totally cheating and interventionist. You should strike this argument. The state's kettlebell. The kettlebell obviously does not solve debt. It doesn't give money to the federal government. No part of their text says that, and interpreting this way for them will be totally unjustified and new. In the Twin R, the DA does not turn debt. Do not interpret their argument for them as economic decline means less revenue, because the Twin R does not say that. It's totally unjustified. Making economic collapse inevitable is not our impact scenario. It's about arbitrarily cutting core government functions when we run out of money to literally pay for stuff and people start pulling their treasuries out of the bond market. The app does solve fast enough, which is our Keohane evidence. It says that there is, quote, nothing as effective as a carbon tax in reducing debt. It is the single instrument that puts the U.S. back into fiscal balance and gets our house in order. Tax cuts are uniqueness for us because they explode the deficit now and guarantee the unsustainability of government functions. The plan immediately solves that since it pays for the tax cuts as well as other government functions, because our evidence says the tax is so powerful that it would not only balance our budget but leave other revenue available that could be used for other purposes like paying for Trump's ridiculous tax agenda. DA. It cannot turn the case. One, we are not going for fiat solves the link, but we do get good faith enforcement of the plan that guarantees we solve revenue. We only have to do a domestic carbon tax, since that's what our evidence says is enough to supercharge revenue in federal coffers. Anything else is Trump no to the plan, which is bad. It's unfair because it means the app never wins the debate. They agree with us because not only does it screw all of their TAs, but it does screw the ability of the app to solve warming. It's also anti-educational because it guarantees that the app can never learn anything other than Trump will nuke the ability of us to solve any problem ever. None of the terminal impacts of the Twitter were contextualized to turning the debt scenario, even if you can invent reasons why the full-scale risk of their cyber attacks or alliances scenario can turn the existential risks that our impact evidence says you should not give it for them because it was not a warranted argument contained in the Twitter. None of their turn case warrants are contextualized to debt. We don't need to build things like subsidies or renewables in order to solve it as well, because we just need to win that the tax gets imposed and put in place that solves everything. I'm going to briefly extend thumpers because the Twitter technically conceded that there's over 30 pieces of legislation that require implementing regulations coming in the status quo. Trump's inevitably going to do another executive order, which means that it requires cuts to 10 regulations if they win the thesis of dealing, probably enough to mitigate the ability of the DA to automatically cause regulations that are not inevitable now. Now, zero impact. The Twitter lacks basically any explanation of how their DA escalates to allies build nukes, do the cyber attacks on their own, do the cyber attack America. You can't let their evidence fill an explanation for them. To the extent this DA is not assurances, Trump destroys that America is now being led by an isolationist administration with zero instincts in defending allies with the next sends out their card doc. The section labeled AT Trumper will be functionally blank. The one in our didn't answer this, and the Twitter answered wrong. Issue-specific uniqueness is a cool buzzword, but the Twitter didn't cite any evidence by name, and their cards don't say that. Tracy Witts might not be the best card in the world, but we do have evidence on it, and they don't, because it says Trump undermines, quote, core security functions, which are defense pact alliances. One more thing about this. What card says failure to assure allies causes war? The one card didn't read any new cards about it, and the one card just straight up doesn't say that. If you think this is new, it's justified by new emphasis in the blog. Drop is a justification in the one yard. No cyber impact. We don't need to win any unique assurances offense, because the way the Twitter explained their impact was cyber escalation. Cyber attacks provide a means for states to shadow box and signal their disapproval of each other, but that
is not a plausible path to nuclear war. Multiple wars, one controlled studies, dropped war decision makers, and experimental conditions are far less likely to escalate when cyber attacks involve. That's because hacking gives states a way to fight below the threshold of war and stay in the gray zone. And conventional conflicts use them to either back down entirely or escalate with kinetic attacks. Cyber options give them a de-escalatory middle ground that substitutes for more aggressive retaliation. Prefer evidence. Drop the pro-night experimental studies with the best available evidence because they can control for other variables. Their evidence is entirely speculative. That's Jensen. Jews and Pure. Cyber war is not new. It happened in Ukraine. It happened between India and Pakistan. It happened between US and Iran during 2019. None of those incidents proved larger escalation, much less a full-scale nuclear exchange. That's Rochi. They are predictive. They're the best indicator of future behavior. The Twitter doesn't have a reason why future cyber attacks will be worse. If that's true, the deterrence just becomes stronger. Constrained on conflict. 3, don't mind the hype. The most charitable reading of their DA scenario in which cyber attacks occur or fall by tit-for-tat retaliation. Nations can just reverse the damage. The lights going out for some subcontractor is not going to force starting a nuclear war over. It's a sliver of the damage that any natural disaster would cause. And even if that's far smaller than the cost of escalation, with great power war, that's John's mind. Their answers are bad. Our evidence is predictive. MSU read our cards. They explicitly forecast future trends. This year, evidence assumes the CMCC may be, but our evidence sites demonstrate on escalation that exists independent of the CMCC. The Twitter failed to explain why the absence of that unravels all basic checks on nuclear war, like rationality and mutually assured destruction. Lastly, the card about nuclear war guaranteeing extinction cannot outweigh 1. We have defense to DA. They have 0 defense to death that isn't blatantly new in the Twitter. Secondly, it just says that nuclear weapons would cool the planet, but that doesn't guarantee full-scale extinction. Their evidence lacks a complete scenario for human extinction, whereas you know that that is guaranteed from the dropped impacts to the debt add-on.
Good debate. Cards, yes. Sure, okay.
Sure, yeah.
That goes.
When you get my computer back.
I mean, I didn't cite that. And then no discount. Maybe it's maybe.
It's sad to get your bracket.
Simon's and Alex problem.
I didn't say they were bad people. They were really nice people.
You still got talking?
Nope.
Good job. Have you? Let's use SpaceX. We have to go enough step verification. Steps.
You go get Steve and I go find Kansas, or?
DC Unity.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah. I'm most certainly substantially better than the last time we saw.
and it's really like
Yeah, the hiatus from this shit has helped a whole lot.
that's fair. Yeah, it seemed like going back to California and stuff also did. I think that there was, Okay, everybody good? The decision is a 3-0 for the affirmative. I mean, I don't think there's really an answer to that thing. Makes it pretty quick and easy. Happy to like answer specific questions you'll have afterwards, but I guess the one other thing I would flag is I think Kansas is in a pretty good spot in terms of like whether at the point the threshold for the like rate trade-off thing is just like, is Congress doing stuff at all, such are they going to do any additional things? I think that they're in a little bit of a better position on that than it sort of came across as you thinking that they are, and so I'm happy to elaborate on that more after. But yeah, didn't really have to get into that stuff too much.
Yeah, I can go next. Debt out on super high. I didn't really understand kind of the strategy on states and the 2NR. Just like no language at all about how states can solve it, which maybe just because there's no explanation earlier in the debate about that. So maybe or obviously impact events on debt earlier, like amending the counterclaim tax to give funds to the federal government or something could be helpful. On the DISAD, I was more up on the internal link and impact stuff than the uniqueness and link stuff, which I can talk about for a second. I think that a problem for the future is the quality of the 1C work card as an internal link and impact card. I don't think it really describes any sort of scenario for allies to raise the risk of conflict. The only part about assurance is about adversarial assurance and their retaliatory capabilities. And there's not a part I can really point to that describes the overview of the 2NR in any capacity. Independent of that, I do think that the Trump thumper on the Russia DA and the 2AC mitigates this a little bit. Kansas seems to be right that if the internal link is about core security assurances, then Trump would make allies more fearful independent of the DA's internal link. The NEG response just sort of asserts in the 2NR that cyber outweighs and has more explanatory power, but I don't think that's really warranted. I also agree with the app there needs to be more of an answer to cyber risks or de-escalatory. I think the argument you're making that cyber forces are a key signal of our strategic capabilities as a way of avoiding this is smart, but I just don't think that's really what the evidence is saying. It seems like OCOs are helpful for deterrence in the cyber world, but if there's no way cyber escalates much, I'm not sure how absent OCOs our allies are willing to initiate conflict with Russia and China. I thought tiny bit differently about the uniqueness and link. At this point, it doesn't really matter, obviously, given the magnitude of debt and some mitigation to the DA. But I think that the way you all were debating uniqueness and link for this DISAD was up until 2NR didn't matter for some. I thought that 1NR on this was as strong as it could have been. I think Kansas is probably right in the abstract that there's something else in the next month that's going to trigger it. But I do think there's a world where the 2NR gets up and says 1AR being a link to the congressional legislative action page is not an argument. They should have listed specific things that are happening. This creates a bad precedent where you can send a link to the uniqueness article and be obviously this disproves the DA politics, whatever. And then you just need to answer the fiat link argument and then impact stuff, and then you can get more time back on case in a world where you have more stuff on debt, which was just the other kind of thought that I had about it. But obviously that just mattered a little bit less for the decision given the magnitude of the add-on and some mitigation to the DA.
I don't really think I have anything to add.
debt impact outweighs. I cared more about Cyber D than Thumpers because I'm not gonna click a URL and take, I'm actually an adult. My big piece of advice is that I think you all should be making the 1AR harder. And I think that the block going buck wild on the advantage and strike down, while clearly we're beating the shit out of strike down as for the 2NC, we kind of missed the forest for the trees. I do not think you need to spend this much time on the advantage. I think you're reading cards that say kind of the same thing. And we should have something else because the 1AR seems too easy and consequentially the 2NR seems incredibly fucking difficult. So like, for example, multiple counter plans for every add-on. Multiple uncarded counter plans for every add-on in the 2NC. New planks for every deficit to states. Don't kick follow-on and process with the 2NC. I don't know why you would do that. It seems good. We should at least keep it alive. I thought that the case debating in the 2NC for what it's worth was really persuasive. I just think there's too much of it.
No questions.
Though BK, I would like to decide a little bit. It doesn't have to be now while we're all like held hostage by me. It could be like in the hallway or like.
For sure,
at
definitely.
dinner. But I'm curious to.
Yeah, I guess the top line thing I'll say, like now, because I think this varies kind of on all four of them, is I do agree with both Grace and Nick in terms of, I think that if Kansas does not have very clear kind of, if y'all are in a better place on the debt thing, then even with some of the stuff that I'm gonna say to you here a little bit about Thumper biz, I think y'all are in a solid place because of the like, I think that they are in a pretty good place for like in ways that I'll talk through a little bit, and provide some advice on kind of tweaks to make to this on some significant number of rigs, at least scrapped inevitably. I thought y'all did a pretty good job of establishing that the plan results in a very large number of regulations to implement it, which is not really a thing I think y'all dealt with or like answered. As a result, the kind of packaging of this that's like, you should be like, there's some chance that the rate you care about is one that gets axed in the squo, but you can be certain the post plan it is just because there's too much shit that needs to get zapped. And I thought the 1AR frame on that was effective. And so I do think there's sort of like a try or die Nick thing here. It's just like you can be like sort of direction or like the certitude of the internal link in world of plan controls or should dictate kind of how I think about like whether the link is unique. Does that make sense? I think that frame, if you couple it with some of the impact adjustments that Grace was talking about, becomes really compelling. I do think that like the 2C Cyber D here, like responsive and deals with like to your point about like we flagged it in 1C. I thought your delivery of that sort of rhetorically and stuff was excellent. Like I was with you on like, yes, y'all have this set of distinctions. I do think all of that operates downstream somewhat of their defense to the kind of internal for impact scenario here. But as it relates to the particular kind of what I was alluding to earlier, like Thumper thing, you can chat about that more.
Is there a reason we're not just counter planning to not thump the DA?
Like, don't do any rigs.
Just don't do anything until the thing ends, until the executive order expires. Simply don't do the thing they said we're gonna do.
Yeah, there's also a version of that where you just like counterplan out of the Thumper when they say instead of like blanket no regs forever.
Yeah, definitely.
2NC counterplannings or like could get you into some issues perhaps.
I don't know what issue.
Good to know.
The type of issue that comes with beating Kansas's stuff. I don't know what, yeah, sure, it's a constructive.
I'll write that down.
It's tough though, because presumably that would counterplan out of federal follow-on as well. In a world where we want that to be in play,
Until like,
oh, that's a good point.
until like what, May 10th or whatever?
yeah, we could, well, but then they get to like perm delay, it
Yeah.
gets kind of, I don't know. It can get real messy real quick if we're trying to go for states.
That's a
But in the world, yeah, in the world we're going for states, then we'll just kick that part of follow on after the particular date or the answers numbers. Yeah.
I'm not gonna vote anymore.
You all good?
Mm-hmm.
Just like quick thoughts on where the warming advantage was at post 1AR. Probably not something you thought about, but just anything would be helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I really didn't think about it,
No,
but
yeah, that's
didn't have a bad feeling in my stomach after. So it seemed fine.
My sense after the talk was that food wars and the salinity thing were the place to go. The 1AR says these things, but I sort of think they should be at the top and we should do less of the warming stuff. I don't know why dehydration kills everybody. And similarly, food wars really short, but I'm pretty sure the Twin Cities read a card from like 15 on this and then moved on. So we should, I think, point that out and show that. Seems like the path of less resistance.
I was pretty, obviously with that and looked at the cards and stuff, I was pretty apt on like PT is not key. It's possible to like grab and stuff substantiate some of the stuff you're drawing here, but some of the stuff they were saying is true in terms of how their evidence characterizes the motives of those countries in relation to right. So it's like Russia, China, Iran. I thought that they were pretty good on like they were not going to like shoot themselves in the face in terms of their geostrategic positioning in response to the United States adopting border adjustment. Ergo, I was pretty apt on states solves that. As far as the warming advantage relative to the SQO, I think the like impact defense part, like I both don't think that y'all are correct that they dropped tipping point stuff because like they have their discussion about like tail end risks and their characterization of that in relation to your models. I also do think that the 2NR kind of like undersells just to a significant degree the amount of uncertainty that the app is winning is embedded in our assessment, in like y'all's author's assessment of no tail end risks. As a result, like warming pretty bad, could be totally catastrophic. Like I feel like when evenly debated, that's kind of always where I would have that stuff. And so for me, the real question would have been, do I think that there is a kind of strong chance that the app makes a meaningful difference? And that would have required seeing how the stuff burst out and then reviewing both sides of it and the way that I just did. Does that make sense?
Yep. That's all I got even. All right, appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry, I actually do have one more question. Sorry, like keep slow here. Where do we think I can get a little time back in the 1AR? Like it seems like I'm over explaining a lot of the thumper stuff and like the 50 for 5 instead of 10 for 1 stuff. But like even though that wasn't an argument in the 2AC, it just like rhetorically helps that it's head, and I feel like that stuff kind of has to stay. But I would have liked a couple more cards on Impact D. Like everyone kind of suspected that's where they were going. Maybe I would have had time to read a couple of Impact D cards to the debt stuff. Like say some thoughts on the state solving it, whatever. Like I kind of would have left 30 seconds back.
I would say maybe like the two header, like the header that's like 1 in 10 taxes and the bumper header. I think that's where you get a bit redundant. And so lapsing those two, like you're right, it's important, but the JC doesn't really make very specific arguments on that point. And I do think something you might do is like you're explaining a lot of this in cross acts at the same time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these are questions that were asked and they're not arguments that were super like warranted in the JC that required tons of warrants in the 1NR. So I feel like combining those two headers a little bit or condensing those down probably could have gotten those 30 seconds back for the impact stuff.
Yeah, that's helpful. I kind of forgot to use cross-sects a little bit more or just reference it like in the speech.
Yeah, most of the
We're all listening to it anyways, so it's like you don't necessarily need to be like this was cross-sects. Like
Sure.
It's all in the back of our heads.
Yeah, I think contrary to the frame of like not using CX, it's like, I think like Grace pointed out a minute ago, I thought y'all's use of CX was very good. It's more just like that enables you then to like not have to double up the next bunch. Honestly though, my primary answer to your question is like, I thought the 1NR was extremely good. Like, yeah, sure, there are some places where you can like adjust it a little bit. I thought it was great. I do think that like the 2 and C should make some adjustments. And obviously the biggest thing is the step thing.
Sweet, that's all I had for realsies. Thanks.
There's a lot.
Thank you.